Hello and welcome. I am Dr. Elizabeth Plummer, and I have been a language teacher for more than 20 years. I've taught in a lot of different countries, both in person, online, and I love to integrate technology in my language teaching. And this year, I was able to build a masterclass with the U.S. Department of State, along with my colleague, Jeff Kuhn, and I will let him introduce himself.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Dr. Jeff Kuhn, and like Elizabeth, it's been about 21 years of English language education. Same thing, online, locally, wherever it may be. And I've always had a love of technology and integrating technology into the classroom. So I've always had a focus on call. Specifically in there, I do a lot of like game-based learning for languages. So that's always been fun. And Elizabeth and I have worked together before on a virtual project back in the day, and so it's been fun to work together again on this specialist master course.
Yes, and this one I think is a lot different than our previous project because previously we worked on a project for individuals in low resource areas, really trying to get them access to resources. And this time we worked on the topic of artificial intelligence in language teaching, which is not really associated with low resource areas. It's kind of more associated with more high resource areas.
Right.
Due to the computing power and the technical requirements to access AI. But as part of building this course, there were a lot of things that we wanted to say, but we weren't able to say because we only had so much time within the course. So we thought we'd do some outtakes from the course of things that we kind of wanted to say, but maybe didn't make it into the videos, as well as updates of things that have happened because we finished recording in June. So that was like, you know, 6 months ago, five
Yeah.
months ago. And a lot has happened since then. So let's go ahead and get started with our first question that I want us to talk, that we decided we wanted to talk about today, which is how does the language people use when talking about AI affect what they think about it?
Hmm. What have you noticed? Because I'm definitely seeing some trends, but what are you seeing right off the bat?
Oh, one of the things I see is that a lot of people talk about AI as this game changer, right? So they'll post something and they'll say, "Look at this! It will do this." Like most recently, I saw someone post um, a, a a piece on a notebook on Microsoft's notebook, which will take like a video and put it into a study guide, and then they took that study guide and they created like questions, like multiple choice questions and review questions from that study guide that students could then use to study the study guide of the video. And they're like, this is such a game changer.
Mm.
And I looked at it and was like, I don't see anything being changed. I don't see that being a game changer. This just looks like a study guide and some questions, things that we've been doing for the entire time I've been alive.
And I wonder when people say game changer, I wonder if they really mean time changer. It's like, oh, this is going to allow me to do something much more quickly. Is a game changer for myself, or maybe from my time as an educator, but is it a game changer, so to speak, for my students? I don't think so. You know.
Yeah. Well, and I always question like, is this something my students actually really want? Because my students, they want more videos. So why would they take a video and turn it into a study guide? They just want to watch the video.
That's a good point. And I think, that how we assume people consume content is one of those issues. And I think, that's great. If you can take a video and crank out some discussion questions around that video and have them in your class, I think it's a really cool concept, and it is that time changer sort of thing for teachers. But I really, that's something I'm seeing when we talk about this language change is I think you see initially with AI, like there's that a lot of the hype vocabulary gets used. But as they start to really kind of work with AI and dig in a little bit deeper, and especially when they run it through some frameworks, that we can have, whether it's like, the gradual release of responsibility type of thing of like, how am I going to do this in my class with my students or things like that. Or, we've talked about the SAMR model in the class quite a bit of just like, I'm not seeing it really revolutionize things I thought it was able to do. And I think you sort of see a more muted vocabulary coming out of educators after they worked with it for a little while.
Yeah, yeah. Another term I heard people talk about a couple months ago is this AI bubble pop. And that's kind of like what you're describing. I don't know if I saw like a pop in the AI bubble happen, but I did see like companies start to be a little bit more targeted in the marketing that they were doing of their products and sort of showcasing, like use cases of their products a little bit better,
Mm.
trying to get more individuals, especially businesses, to buy into their products and to pay for
Right.
their products. Anything else that we hear around like terminology, the way people talk about AI?
A little bit going into something we talk a little bit about in the course is just the personification of it or anthropomorphizing of it, of just like, using, pronouns with it, other, versus being like software or it, and I think sometimes early on in that conversation, it's very much like, they give it a personality of sorts, and then, working with it a little bit more, it sort of, again, mutes down a little bit of just, they refer to it as a software or it, that the characterization of it, like, I hate saying the names because it might trigger somebody's phone or device in their house if I say them, but the ones that we use every day. um
Yeah,
you know
yeah. Um, I still hear people calling it their friend, and that to me is a little troubling. Like I want friends in real life. I don't want a digital friend. And so I think calling it your friend does create this environment where people start to think, hey, this could be my friend. And then what does that say for real friends if we're replacing them with our digital friends? Um,
yeah, and then we're getting into philosophy, right? When you have a friend that tells you everything you want to hear, all the good, none of the bad, is it really your friend? um you know,
yeah, yeah. You're the best teacher ever.
Great, I love the affirmations, but can you help me with this worksheet?
You
um
never make any mistakes ever.
And I think that's when we'll really start to see, AI as a game changer if it's able to like criticize. I think there's this great idea of like using AI as a conversation partner for students to practice English. And I love the idea of using technology as a failure safe space to engage. But eventually it's got to start, responding to, issues or errors or mistakes that I'm making in my language. And when it does that, I think it'd start to really be a game changer. you
Yeah.
know.
So I think one of the other things I've seen around sort of like the technology, I mean the terminology, is that a lot of things are being called AI that are not actually AI. And I think that's an issue of funding, right? Like companies want funding. And so my colleagues who are in the IT department say that there's a lot of money in AI. So if you call
Mm.
something AI, you're going to get more money. So piecing like what is AI and what is not AI, and then what kind of AI is it?
Right. And that's where I think being savvy consumers and knowing those terminologies, because someone would call something AI and it's like, well, it just goes out on the internet, finds information and brings it back. It's just that's a search engine chatbot. It's very basic algorithm, machine learning, which I get it. It's a small part of AI versus like, artificial general intelligence, which can, create new information. Those are very different things. And sometimes I think, simple chatbots are being advertised as these massive, pieces of artificial intelligence software, and it's not necessarily the case. So I think, teachers need that discerning eye,
Yeah,
especially
yeah,
school administrators too, where they're the ones who are going to be paying for software that the school uses and making sure they actually are getting what they think they're getting when they buy, university or school licensing or district licensing for things.
yeah, yeah. Definitely. If you're spending money on it, like you should be checking to make sure it
You know what it is.
actually functions in the way they say it functions. Let's move on to our next question. We're seeing a lot more presentations at conferences on AI. So, what advice do we have for individuals who want to present on the topic of AI?
What do you think? I think I went first last time. I don't remember.
I don't remember either. I think one of the things that I think is that it's great to showcase the way that you're using AI and to show other teachers the way you're using AI. But if that's all you're doing, then you're not getting to like the heart of teaching, right? Like we need to move beyond like being a tech trainer. Like we are professionals and we should be showcasing how this is going to help language learning,
Mhm.
not just how it functions. If I want to know how it functions, I will go to the company's website and look at their tutorials.
Right.
If I'm talking to a language teacher, I really want to know about how it is as a support for language teaching and learning.
Yeah, and I that's for me, when I go to a lot of technology focused presentations, like I think there very much is that like article approach to conference presentations. Here's what we did and here are the results, and but like I really want to know how the sausage gets made, so to speak, with it, of show me like how you actually used it and what was going on when the students interacted with the software. What did they do and how did they respond? I think, instead of just sort of being like, here's what we did, here are the results of what we did, here's how it could be used for you. I'd really like a more in-depth examination of how it played a part in the classroom, how students responded, what complications you had. And I think if we could sort of do more like post-mortem analysis of using technology in the classroom versus more of a typical like article approach to our conference presentations, I think there'd be a lot of value. I don't know. I think, and that comes from a game development. After a game gets made, your team sits down and is like, what went wrong, what went right, what do we need to fix in the future. I think those sorts of interactions would be really interesting to watch and participate in at a conference.
Yeah. I also think like some of the most meaningful presentations are not ones where you show these outputs of AI. Look, and then we asked AI to do this. Like, but you actually start to really play with the software and critically analyze it. Because I mean, as we just said, previously, companies will say AI will do this, and then you'll have computer scientists who say, this is great for learning, but is it actually great for learning? And so
Right.
we don't want to magnify the marketing of these companies.
There you go. That's exactly it. I think, don't just kind of like, follow that, but instead, like, here's when I can use it. And I tried these different scenarios. This is where it was effective and this is where it was ineffective. Um, you know, and we get it. It's like a lot of those companies will sponsor the conferences and they give out cool tote bags. But, let's question them a little bit, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I went to a presentation in Vietnam from someone on ChatGPT, and they talked about using AI to create ChatGPT specifically to create multiple choice questions. And it was really great because they talked about the challenges they have with the questions it creates and things like that. But then they talked about how they then took that and used it in the classroom. I created these, and then this is how I used it in the classroom. This is where it fit within my lesson, where it fit within my curriculum. And so then you could decide for yourself, is this something I wanted to do? And as part of that, they did have to demo, like, how do you use the technology, right? When you're
Right.
talking about pedagogy, often you have to show the technical aspects. So I don't think we need to shy away from showing those technical aspects, but they shouldn't dominate the conversation.
Yeah, and I think kind of tying back into the first question too, I think if we don't necessarily have to hype or revolutionize. Sometimes a tool can do something very small that's very significant for learning in your classroom. And I guess that's what I want to see. These tools don't have to like change the world, and that's always what educational technology is going to do. Revolutionize the classroom, change the world. And it never does. Look at Larry Cuban back in the 80s, writing about this. But show us those small little successes and show us the small little failures of using this tool in the classroom so we can better frame it for our own use. I think that's what I'd
This,
like to see in
yeah,
presentations.
this reminds me of something that I was hoping would make it into the course, but didn't actually make it into the course. When I was working on my PhD, my mentor, Leslie Schreier, she said in one of the classes, that all teachers have a closet full of technologies that that we're silver bullets. That's another term. That we're silver
Yep.
bullets. We're going to revolutionize our classroom, just gathering dust, right?
Right.
And it really highlights this sort of cyclical nature of these technologies. That this is going to be so great. It's going to, revolutionize education. They talk about all the marketing, the hype, and then our administrators they purchase it for our classroom, and it doesn't actually really produce those kinds of results. Um, and so we don't want to be the ones in conference presentations doing that when we're
Oh,
presenting at conferences, saying this is going to revolutionize your classroom. We want to be realistic about what it is that it's doing. And maybe it's doing really cool and amazing things. And that's fantastic. I love
yeah. I
to
mean,
see those.
and that's look, we're saying this with the experience behind us. My CV is littered with dead technology. Like I presented on a lot of different things, and I don't use them anymore. I do think though maybe, and this is one thing I'd say it's slightly different with AI is I think one of the things that for me it's interesting about AI is it's an infrastructure, not necessarily a tool as much. Like, if I look at like a tool, like here's this software that makes multiple choice tests for me or something like that. It's a thing, it's a widget that does one thing or, maybe has a little bit of flexibility. But I think AI is just going to be this underpinning infrastructure like the internet itself that's going to allow for a lot of things to get developed. So I think, we're not going to see AI like disappear like we did, those litany of our technologies we presented on in years TESOL past. So it's
Creating
gonna be
good transparencies. That's mine. Creating good transparencies.
right. We all use transparency still. But yeah, there's that thing. I think AI is going to be there as this platform. So it gives it a little more. It's always going to be here, like just like the internet itself. But what's
Yeah, yeah.
next?
You pulled a term that we didn't talk about previously, which was tool.
Right,
That people are calling it a tool. And I that's a really deep conversation. Like, is it a tool? Is it not a tool? And I think you just kind of answered the question. Like, but I mean, we're going to continue to see people call it tools. And
right.
um, we need to question the use of the worm tool, the worm, the
The
use of the
whizzed
word.
away through it. Transition right there.
It totally fits. The use of the word tool, like when people say tool, I always am like, is it really actually a tool? Like that's always the first thing I think when I see someone call it a tool. Is it a tool? In that situation, it might be, but
Right. Well, and I think this kind of it leads into the third question a little bit of, what can it do? It's like we can look at AIs, like we're saying, this infrastructure that's just going to help run things in the future, but it also can, if you carve out a little slice of it, it can be a tool, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you set us up for the last question. What's something that has happened in AI recently that you think English language teachers should know about? You first.
We talked about this off camera a minute, but just the custom the custom AI, like the mini AIs, the little bespoke ones that you can set up. And for me, it started as something silly where with the graphics card on my computer, I can run like a AI locally off my computer. I threw every cooking recipe I have into it, and it became like my assistant chef in the kitchen. And I was like, this is really cool. The idea that I can take my material, throw it in, and so the software is only going to pull from my material. And so it's something I mentioned a little bit of just it being a research assistant. I can ask it to fetch things that I wrote. When did I talk about this in my syllabus past or things like that? The ability for it to go and find things just for me, I think is going to be something that is really a good push forward for AI for educators when we think about it like that. What about you?
Things that have happened recently. I think that one of the things I've seen happen recently is that several companies have introduced more advanced voice capabilities, and they're calling them tutors. And they're showcasing, how you can learn a language using these tutors and how you can have these natural conversations with them. And I think this is really exciting to have the ability for individuals to have non natural conversations with individuals.
Yeah.
Um, but I also think that these companies are pushing out something that doesn't actually look like language learning to me. Right. And so we need to be cautious when a company says, look, you can learn a language. But what does language learning actually look like?
Right.
We are professionals. So it's really exciting. I love the voice capabilities that have come out. The more natural language, the more natural voices, um, and the ability, even me, I'd sit and sometimes chat just to hear what it's going to ask and how it's going to ask it.
Right.
I, yeah, it's an exciting time, but also, is it language learning? I think that's an important question. Is it language learning?
Right. And that's when I'll go to, the company's website and I'll even just like troll their job postings and or look at their board and be like, is there any language learning experts affiliated with this company? I'll go try to like source out when they're promoting this as a language learning tool. I'm like, well, how many language learning experts do you have on staff, like to make that claim? You know,
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are some really popular companies, I'm not going to call them out, who do have language learning designers, but their things aren't actually like
right,
language learning in the way that a lot of us think about language learning, right? So there's always going to be a balance, I think, between what something is capable of doing in terms of the technical components and the language learning, what language learning actually looks like, right? There have to be
right,
some kind of compromises, and you have to be okay with the compromises that have been made. I do notice that those companies that do have like learning experience designers who are language learning experts will push out things that do look more like language learning. Sometimes they're like supplemental things to their core programs.
right. Yeah. And that I think that's you hit it well right there. I just think that we have to sort of, you know, understand that like technology, there's always going to be these like give and take, push and pull sort of things where it's not, there's a compromise with technology, and I think, finding where it's going to be slotted into your classroom because it's not a magic bullet, it's not a cure all, but it's also not going to like destroy the classroom either. It's going to land somewhere in the middle, and just we got to figure out where.
I think it's going to be different depending on where you are,
Yeah.
where you
Right.
live, and your students and what the needs are in terms of their language learning.
And that's why I like this specialist masterclass because we're getting this sampling of people with experience from all over the world and from a deep bench of experience personally for them as well. So they can we're getting examples here and there of how it's getting used and what successes they've had. And so I think that's great. Is the more educators can get together and we can start to figure out where does this work. It's like if a teacher in Peru and a teacher in Kenya are having the same experience, we got to get them together, and get them, cooperating. The more we can do that, the better, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess that's a plug for talking to your colleagues about what's happening, what they think about AI, having those conversations with them, and not just hiding and saying AI doesn't exist, but AI
Right.
exists, and what do we think about it? Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
It's been really fantastic to have this little
That was
outtake
fun.
chat with you. We'll do it again. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in our next outtake.